Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. Let's kick this video off with some good news. AMD have managed to procure additional 5 as well as 7nm, which, let's face it, 7nm right now is the more important of the two nodes, capacity over at TSMC. And how have they managed to do this, I hear you scream? Well, they have managed to do so because Apple are reducing their demands on the aforementioned processors as they are ready to move on to bigger and better things, or I guess the technical term is smaller and denser nodes. This information comes at a perfect time in the industry, given obviously all of the shortages. Courtesy, by the way, to Nerd Tech over on Twitter for letting us know about this. And this scuttlebutt in the industry is really coming at an exciting time because it's not just this, but we're also seeing additional fabs start to come to play, and these will start to, come online in the next 2, 3 to 5 years. It's of course important to realize that it's not just like, oh, okay, dig a hole, build the fab, and then you're good to go. It takes quite a while for fabs to not only be built, but then for them to actually create capacity, to be operating at capacity. So this is something, when people are saying to you, well, these new fabs are coming online, that's great. In 2025, future us will be really happy. But in the shorter term, the fact that TSMC are able to allocate AMD additional capacity is going to help a ton. And yeah, on screen right now, you can see the number of wafers that TSMC are currently producing, and a good number of those are already going to AMD. But of course, you have to remember that the consoles too are utilizing those same wafers. They're basically coming out of AMD's share of the pie. Either way, this is fantastic news for, well, the shortages. It is, of course, also worth us discussing that this is not going to be something that happens immediately in terms of improving product availability. However, it's a damn sight faster than creating a new fab from scratch. Realistically, depending on the timelines and how quickly the ink is allowed to dry on the contract, we could be looking at this becoming a thing in around 3 months. That is for the actual wafers to be produced, and then obviously this then needs to trickle into product availability. So let's say around 3 to 6 months we should start to see the shortages alleviate, but more realistically 6 to 9 months. Either way, that's fantastic, of course, because there are a number of things now that are starting to come into play, including Nvidia also grabbing up additional manufacturing capacity from Samsung. This is one of the reasons that Nvidia's launches for the RTX 3060 and RTX 3060 Ti, in terms of the amount anyway of availability, has been a little better. And of course they need to do that anyway, because when you have more products, unless you want those products to have very crappy availability, you need to actually have more dies available, because obviously the 3060, 3060 Ti, 3070, 3080, 3090, and we're soon going to have the 3080 Ti joining the party. All of those do require components, and it's not just the dies themselves, but things like VRM and memory and even the PCBs. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all of this comes to pass over the next, let's say, 6 months to 12 months. But I do think that the shortages are going to start to alleviate themselves. And now we're going to move on to the RX 6700 XT. WCCF Tech have managed to procure a ton of benchmarks for this upcoming GPU. It's going to launch fairly soon, of course, and it's seemingly competing very well with the RTX 3070. I'm going to go through a few of their numbers in just a moment, as they're pitting them against both the RTX 3070 and RTX 3060 Ti. And I have to say that the card looks to be very impressive in terms of traditional rasterization performance. So let's start things out with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. In the red here, we have AMD's RX 6700 XT, and yellow represents the RTX 3070. I'm having one of those days where I can't speak, which is super helpful. So 81 frames a second versus 69 giggity. And for some reason or another, their 3060 Ti results are identical here with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I have reviewed the 3060 Ti, and to be fair, it is quite close to the RTX 3070. In fact, in my review, I basically said that you can almost say that it means that the 3070 isn't that worth the cash, but that's beside the point. Borderlands 3, 86 versus 81. Cyberpunk, also very close, but slightly ahead on Nvidia's architecture. And basically the two do seem to trade blows depending on the game. Hitman, for example, does a little bit better on AMD's architecture. We have Red Dead Redemption does a little bit better on Nvidia's. Resident Evil does a little bit better on Nvidia. And so on and so on and so on. I'm not going to read out all of the results. You can see them on screen in some cases yourself. And again, do go over to WCCF Tech to check out the rest of the benchmarks. Because they have quite a few there. So originally there were a ton of rumors that the RX 6700 XT would be about on par, maybe slightly faster than the RTX 3060 Ti. But then before AMD's announcement, I leaked that I was hearing that the numbers were actually better than that. They were competing very well with the RTX 3070, and of course it does seem that this is the case. Ray tracing performance is still behind on AMD's cards, but yeah, it's kind of that trade-off, what you prefer in terms of architecture, and it's really good that we actually have now AMD competing in the mid-range. I wish they'd actually have launched the 6700 series earlier, but that's a topic from, a completely different topic, but obviously it is to do with the shortages that they've been facing. Either way, this card looks really cool. But we also have yet more good news, and this positive news is actually from Intel, as Intel Xe DG2 seems to have been leaked by Intel's Raja Koduri. Well, actually, I suppose technically the term would be teased. And there's not much you can see in terms of the actual photo directly of the test setup. It's not like, it's an in-depth analysis of all of the specifications of the GPU. And if you just quickly glance at it, you might say to yourself, that's cool, but who cares? However, there are a couple of very interesting takeaways from this photo if you get your magnifying glass and do some real analysis. You can see what essentially looks like almost two motherboards. However, one of those is almost certainly a GPU test board. They basically look kind of like that during bring up. And in fact, it almost looks like a CPU cooler has just been plonked on top of this thing. Another very fascinating detail in this photo is you can see in the background, or rather on the monitor, 3D mark. And if you look at the tests which seem to be installed, they have all of the hallmarks of DirectX 12 Ultimate, including what looks to me like the ray tracing benchmark. So this does seem to heavily imply that DG2 does indeed have hardware-based ray tracing. And we have heard quite a few rumors that this is the case. In fact, I've reported on them before, but this is further evidence that this actually is true, that DG2 is going to have hardware-based ray tracing, and of course mesh shaders, because we've already seen Raja tease the mesh shader benchmark actually just prior to the, release of it on 3D Mark. So we know that it's almost certainly got variable rate shading, because Intel's Gen 11 graphics also has variable rate shading, and so on and so on. So this is definitely looking like a fully fleshed out GPU. From what we understand, DG2 only is one tile, so that's 512 execution units, and it should be fairly decent in terms of performance. It's very difficult though to get an exact measurement of how well it is going to perform, because we don't know small little details like clock frequency, for example, or actually what differences fundamentally there are in the architecture. We know that, for example, the current Gen 11 graphics do not support things like hardware-based ray tracing, so we don't exactly know, and by exactly I mean we have no clue, how it's actually implemented onto the GPU for DG2. I am very hopeful that Intel do very well here, because, as I've said several times in the past, ultimately Nvidia and AMD are making really good money from the shortages. They are able to just sell out easily. Like if they doubled or tripled the amount of cards that were being produced, they could still sell out of those cards in this particular climate. But at the end of the day, it means that we as customers, A, are at the mercy of the supplies of just two companies, and B, it also means that if only one of them is putting out a competitive product, then I mean, just for example, let's, wheel back a little bit, wind back the hands of time and go to Pascal. The RX 480, in my opinion, was a really nice mid-range card, but it was not a GPU that was able to contend with like the GTX 1080 or 1080 Ti. Vega, in my opinion, wasn't a bad architecture, but it just wasn't able to compare with Pascal in terms of efficiency. I don't want to go back through history too much, but what I do want to say is if we had another player to offer us products, then clearly that would only benefit us as end users. And the final thing that I want to discuss in this video is, well, it seems that Microsoft have made a statement regarding ZeniMax. ZeniMax obviously own a ton of different IPs as well as studios, including Bethesda, so that's Fallout games and Skyrim and all of that type of stuff. And of course Doom, which is personally one of my favorite games of all time, is the original Doom, and so on and so on. Bottom line, they are stating that the platform that you will be able to play these games on is only going to be one which either has Game Pass available or their xCloud services. And I have to say that I'm not super surprised by this. I kind of figured that what they would do is do like a 12-month exclusivity for certain games and others would not launch on the PlayStation. But this is, of course, the route they've gone. It'll be very interesting to see how this affects things. At the end of the day, there's a ton now of games which are now on Game Pass, including all of the Doom games, Wolfenstein, basically all of id's catalogue and Bethesda's catalogue. And this is going to shake up the industry, I think, more in the future. Personally, from a personal perspective, I'm not a huge Fallout fan. I'm not a massive, Elder Scrolls fan either. Like, I've played them. They're fun games, but they're not something I super get into. But I am a massive fan of games like Wolfenstein and Doom and, even Evil Within, I think is quite an underrated horror game. I do, however, speak from the perspective of quite a lot of privilege because obviously I have like a high-end gaming PC as well as a PlayStation and an Xbox, so I can get to enjoy those experiences. It'll be very interesting to see how this affects Microsoft's market share. I have the sneaking suspicion that xCloud is going to be the real thing here. I think that there's a good chance that we're going to see a higher take-up of xCloud subscriptions because obviously you can play that across so many different devices. So that is good, the fact that you will be able to play it on xCloud as well, rather than you needing, for example, an Xbox console. With that said though, I just want to throw that in as kind of like a bonus thing. Hopefully you have enjoyed the video though. Take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. You know what to do as well, of course. Ring the bell icon if you're not already subscribed. You should do that as well. And let me know down below, are you interested in Intel Xe? Or are you just going to kind of step out of this generation of GPUs, just hold on to what you've got? Obviously, RDNA 3 as well as Lovelace launches next year. So it's going to be a very interesting 12 to 18 months in tech, I suspect. With that said, take care of yourselves. Bye for now.